Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we're going to be talking about my experience with Ghostlore. So, before I get into the video, first off, I'm going to be linking a video by Tenkiei. It's going to be a Ghostlore review, so that if you have no idea what's going on screen, you can watch that and then come back here. And then, of course, as well, I'm going to be linking a new player build guide by Tenkiei as well, because this is not a build guide, this is a build showcase. And what that means is you should not play this build. It is mainly because there's a lot of unintended mechanics, although what you can do is take some of the lessons learned from this video and apply it to your own builds, because I believe Ghostlore has plenty of build diversity, so you can have fun with anything in this game. But specifically, this build is probably not going to survive any changes. Now, of course, if you like Ghostlore content like this, I'd heavily suggest leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel, as that is the best way of letting me know that you want more Ghostlore content like this in the future once things die down. Sadly, I have to stop things short this time around because I only got to Hell Depth 4, and that is because in about 3 days, the new Last Epoch patch comes, but I'll probably be playing this more in the future as I want to dig my talons deeper into the end game. Now, of course, what build is this? This is Monsoon. This is Monsoon cast on movement skill, cast on crit. So if you don't know, with the new skill systems with Ghostlore, you can combine 2 skills to create a new skill. And that has essentially made so much skill diversity that it's absolutely insane. And they've done a wonderful job with this system. And this skill is from that system. So for instance, you take Icicle Mine from Geomancer and you combine it with Force Pull from Adept and you create Monsoon. So it creates this Ice Tornado on cast, and it can deal damage per second. It crits per second as well. Like it can crit, so it's like a hit per second, and it is ridiculous. You can make it huge like you see in my footage. You can also make it, of course, last a long duration, all that. And it's wonderful just in general. Like the skill's great, right? It also pulls enemies into it so that it also has a little bit of crowd control. Now, the way that we're casting it is we have 100% chance to cast a Monsoon on movement skill thanks to Adept. This makes it so that whenever we use a movement skill, we cast a Monsoon. Now, we also have it hooked up with 40% chance to cast on critical strike. So for instance, whenever we use that Stampede, so Stampede is, I think, the Earth Geomancy skill plus Rush from Hashashin. That combined means that you just move and do a bunch of crits, and that's important because the more crits we do, the more Monsoons we cast, and all of that combined means, of course, we cast on crit Monsoon 40% of the time. One of the biggest problems, though, is Monsoon, or just any skill in general, when it's put with cast on crit, it can actually cast itself, right? And that's a problem because you can have infinite Monsoons, because what'll happen is a Monsoon will sit on a boss, it will cast on crit itself, then it will summon another Monsoon, which summons more Monsoons. And as you can tell, this gets exponential and eventually ends up with infinite damage for, at the most part. Like technically there is a cap because each Monsoon has like a duration per se, but like, let's just say like for the purposes of this video in this game, the damage would become infinite for the purposes. Now, this is probably unintended, so this is probably one of the things that could change in the future. This build would still function even if they changed that. It's just like a funny little thing on bosses, watching them go from tick, 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 dead. It's really funny because what happens is the first Monsoon starts ticking, creates a Monsoon, then the next one makes a Monsoon, and then it just makes so many Monsoons that like they go from like half health to dead instantly because of that's how many Monsoons it's casting per second, which is really funny. Now, of course, we have stuff. So normally in Ghostlore, right, we have skill charges, and you have to use these skill charges to use skills, stuff like that. And the problem is, you know, if we were to do this with that limitation, we wouldn't have enough skill charges to cast that many Monsoons. But thankfully, all these trigger skills, they have chance to not use a skill charge when triggered. And we combine all of that together to make it so that Monsoon does not use a skill charge when triggered. And there's a problem with that. As of the moment, as at least from what I've seen, trigger skills when you trigger them and they do not consume a charge, like when a skill does not use a charge, it also doesn't consume mana. So I'm actually not spending the mana on any of these monsoons, which probably should change as well in the future. But that wouldn't break the build either because we have plenty of mana sustain, and it will only take a little bit more mana steal to fix that. So that's fun. So like that's cool and dandy. But all of that combined leads to a bunch of monsoons that do a bunch of damage, that pull enemies in. And of course, the monsoons on crit, they cast lightning, which then casts more monsoons. So it kind of like chains into each other. And whenever I rush through a pack, I create a bunch of monsoons, which then create more monsoons. And then that clears up the pack pretty quickly. As you can tell, my numbers are really low, and I'm killing enemies with tens of thousands of HP points, like in terms of, and some of them with hundreds of thousands of HP, and I only do like 2k per tick. But that's just how many monsoons that we're talking here. Like that's how many that are spawning, right? Which is really fun. So with all that being said, we're gonna go in game and talk about it more in detail here. All right, here we are in game with the build. So of course I scaled up the UI. Normally I don't play with the UI like this, but I scaled it up so that you guys could actually see in the video because, you know, if I had the UI down in scale, you wouldn't actually be able to see what you're looking at. Now, first things off, Monsoon. So if you don't know, in this new version of the skill tree, you can actually combine skills and also put little support gems on them depending on what class you choose, right? So for Monsoon, it requires Dervish and Force Pull. So both these combined creates Monsoon, which is like an ice tornado, and it pulls enemies in and deals ice damage per second. Now, the main things that we have is we have it on trigger on crit, right? 40% chance to trigger on crit, and then trigger on movement skill. Both of these combined not only gives it a 100% chance not to consume a charge whenever we trigger it, it also makes it so that we trigger it whenever we move, and 40% chance whenever we you know, crit, which is wonderful because that means a bunch of monsoons. And this allows us to simply use a movement skill throughout maps and cast monsoons on enemies. And the main skills modifiers we have is skill multiplier, because we don't care about the MP cost because we're not actually spending it. And we don't care about the skill charges because we're not actually using skill charges. So that's fine. And we combine that with increased projectile radius. So if you don't know, almost every skill in Ghostlore right now is technically a projectile, or what works with projectile radius. If you want to know if something works for something, put it on there, and if it says its name in green, it works for it. If it doesn't say it in green, it does not work for it. So this, of course, this increased projectile radius allows our monsoon to be big. Now, the other skill that's important for this setup is Stampede. Stampede is a combo of Dashing Strike from Hashashin and Geomancer, and this allows us to have that dash you see in the video, and it crits a bunch of times. Now, we need to make sure that it has 5 faster cooldowns on it. So in Ghostlore, these are additive. So we can make it so that this causes no skill charges to use. Essentially, we can just spam it, right? We can literally just spam it as much as we want, but it also does no damage. It can still crit and proc things, but it does no damage because that skill multiplier is additive as well. So this does no damage. But like I said, we just want to spam it. And this is based off of cast speed. So the more cast speed we get, the faster we can dash through maps and the more monsoons we get, right? And then of course, the rest here is just a mind over matter setup with 5 faster cooldowns on it, so that of course it has no cooldown. So we can spam it so that it makes it so that we take less damage. Makes it so that, you know, of course, all the damage taken comes as mana, which is great because we have plenty of mana leech, so we can sustain those kind of injuries, right? I don't think mind over matter should be 100% of damage taken as mana. I think it should be like a portion of it. Otherwise, it's kind of like OP. So if the devs are watching, I would probably do that. And then, of course, the rest of it doesn't really matter on it. Now, the other skill, we have Thunderstorm. Thunderstorm is linked on cast on crit. Like I was saying in the intro, see how it says 40% chance on trigger. But if I move it over here, it says 10% chance on trigger. So it's halving this trigger and halving this movement skill trigger. But if I move it here, it fixes it. I have no idea why. Maybe it's because it's not on the same length, but that shouldn't be the case. You shouldn't be able to do this and be able to like abuse it in this way. Like it should either work all the time or none of the time, if that makes sense. And of course, we make it so that whenever it's triggered, it doesn't cast any charges either. So that means it doesn't cost any mana as well. And of course, those can give us Fury on hit, which is 40% more damage, which is great. So we grab as much Fury chance as possible with that. And then the rest of it is just Ice Affinity, like MP cost, seal charges, MP cost. That's so that our Stampede costs no mana because we're actually casting this, and our Mind Over Matter costs no mana. And that's pretty much it for our passives. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is our is this. So this is confusing, I know, but TLDR, when we want ILO runes with Utalas in them for crit chance and Talos for additional ice damage. So this is a bunch of more damage. It also, the more crit you get, the more monsoons you get, the more damage you deal. So as you start filling out your whole board with ILOs, you eventually get a bunch, and you get a bunch of crit chance, crit multi. These are insanely strong. These should probably be nerfed to like 2% crit per or whatever, but overall I like them. And of course, you can get them with modifiers like this one. This one has HP and crit on it, which is insane, by the way. And then we make sure to run at least one Moku. Moku, if you don't know, it just gives you HP steal and mana steal. Eventually, you might want to run 2 of these so you're a little bit tankier, but overall, I found 2 of them to be fine. Now, one thing I want to make sure you guys know is currently in Ghostlore, accuracy matters for everything. Every single hit, it matters for every single hit and skill. Like, that is not a minion, I believe. So you need to make sure that you have 100% chance to hit enemies. Otherwise, you will actually hit like a wet noodle. But yeah, that's overall our setup on our board. Is just a bunch of ILOs and then, of course, Moku. Now, for our weapons here, our weapon's pretty good. I managed to put 4 sockets on it and put in additional ice damage, which will apply to our skill, by the way. We got percent crit, MP steal, and cast speed. Cast speed is one of the most important stats for this game, for this build, because the faster we go, the better. It's very important. And that triggered skills damage multiplier, that's more damage. That is from the one chick, the shrine chick that adds a affix to your item. My shield is absolute garbage. I need to fix it. I need to get a better one eventually. I just haven't dropped one in like forever. My scarf here just has crit chance, crit multi, HP, absorb. Absorb is like armor in this game. I was planning on reforging this eventually with the Hell Forge and all that, but I didn't manage to do it before I got finished with the character. And of course here, our hat is just like life. That's it. Eventually, we got to get a better one. This is nice because it means we need less of those chance to trigger things, but it is a less damage multi. So eventually you want to get rid of this and actually just put on more chance for triggered skills, not to use a charge on your stuff. And then here, we have cast speed, HP, and mana gain on taken. I wanted to keep crafting on this and adding affixes, but I didn't have the time. I want cast speed specifically. Cast speed's so important with this build to make it feel good. So make sure that you get plenty of cast speed. And that's pretty much it for the build. It's not really that different. It's whatever. Like I said, there's a lot of things that will probably change about this build and be fixed by the next time I play. So with all that being said, this has been Dread. Off to go work on some last Epoch stuff.